Welcome back to Elmer Time.
I like Star Trek.
American Citizens Band Radio. Let's talk about it. All right, let's start off with history. Got a few dates on the board here, starting off with 1945. The FCC introduced Citizens Band. However, what they introduced to us in the United States was a UHF, ultra-high frequency band between 460 and 470 megahertz. Keep in mind this is back in 1945, where primarily all radios were tube radios, large, heavy, boat anchors is what they used to be called. So it didn't really go over that well, even though that's what what they tried to do for the American public, to use a two-way short distance communications setup. However, in that same time era, during World War II, the American military was using the 27 megahertz band for communications such as out of tanks. And the 27 megahertz band is the band that's being used nowadays. 1949, I read here that the Citizens Band radio service was formally established by law. However, what I could not find out is if they were referring to the 460 to 470 meg ultra high frequency band, or if they were speaking about the 27 megahertz band within the HF portion. So that's kind of a question mark for me. 1958, here we go. Here's where Citizens Band was introduced, and it was the Class D service, and it was the 27 megahertz. And back then, at the beginning, they gave us 23 channels. It was around, 26.965 to, 27.255? Within that range to get those 23 channels. In the early 60s, the uses, business, farming, trucking, personal use, of course ham radio operators were testing the waters there as well, because it was kind of an all-around, whoever gets in there with a radio can use it kind of thing at that point. And also during this time, transistors, watch this mic cord here, transistors were replacing vacuum tubes in radios, which meant radios are going to get smaller and smaller, more compact, better for mobile use, handheld more petite, smaller radios for your desktop. Let's see, 1969 is when the FCC designated Channel 9 as the emergency channel. We'll get on that a little more later on here. 1970s. At this point, it's the peak of the CB culture in the United States. There were many movies, and many songs about CB radio usage, truck drivers using CB radios. It was popularity at its highest level. Not only that, at this point, there were no computers, no cell phones, and it turns out that the CB radio became a social interaction device for small cities, large cities, and the person behind the microphone could be anybody that they wanted to be because they weren't being seen. And this went on until mid-1980s. 1977, this is when the 40-channel radios were introduced, extending from the 27.255 up to 27.405. Also, I should note here that in 1958, here the Citizens Band, the radios being used were in AM mode only, amplitude modulation. 1983, let's see, one more thing for 1977. Not only were the 40-channel radios introduced, but also single sideband radios were introduced on CB radio. Upper sideband, lower sideband. We'll get into that a little further as well. 1983, did I forget something about license requirements? I did. In the 1970s also, there was a license requirement to operate CB radios in the United States. However, in 1983, the license requirement is canceled. And this is due to the market being flooded with CB radios. CB radios are everywhere within the United States. So many people were using CB radios and not getting their license, their federal FCC license to operate. And they were using what was called a handle, a name, instead of their FCC call sign or call numbers. And this was so flooded with people not using a federal license that the federal government just said, okay, enough's enough, no more license. Year 2021, it's fairly recently, FM was introduced into CB radios, and that's due to a company that makes CB radios, Cobra Electronics. They petitioned the FCC in 2016 so that they could revise Part 95 rules and have it so that FM is also another mode of transmission, FM being frequency modulation. So now radios today are 40 channel, AM, FM, upper and lower sideband. The power requirement stays the same throughout the whole time cycle here. And if I don't get to it later, it's 4 watts AM and FM. It's 12 watts on sideband. Sorry. It's 12 watts sideband, which means upper sideband and lower sideband. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk definitions. Starting off, ANL, that's automatic noise limiter. This is usually a circuit in many CB radios. Some radios will have it switchable so that you can turn it on and off. Others just have it on at all times. Antenna tuner, sometimes called a matcher. What this does is it matches the impedance of the radio to the impedance of the antenna system. If there's an improper match, you could damage the radio, the transmitter in the radio. Usually used for antennas that have capabilities of more than one band. More than one, say, a ham radio antenna will transmit on many different bands, where a CB radio antenna may only transmit on, it's designed to transmit only on one band. However, you can sometimes get around a CB antenna being matched only for one band with an antenna tuner, and you can tune that antenna sometimes, depending on the antenna, up at the 10 meter band or down at the 12 meter band. Also, CB radio is considered 11 meter band. We'll get into that later. AM, that's amplitude modulation. That is a form of transmission. Amperage, that is the measured amount of current in amps. Say a CB radio, when it's in receive mode, no matter if it's AM or sideband, doesn't matter. If it's just in receive mode, it might pull 500 to 1,000 milliamps. However, that same radio, if transmitting on AM, it might the amperage draw might be anywhere between 2.5 to 4 amps. On sideband, because of the higher wattage output, the amperage draw will be more as well, and you're looking anywhere between 3.5 and 12 amps in draw. Just a relative figure. Clarifier tunes the incoming sideband signals on your radio so that they can be understood. It's for receive only. However, later on we'll get into radios that are modified, where the clarifier is tied. And I spelt that wrong. Where the clarifier is tied to the transmitter, so that when you're tuning the receive, you're also tuning the transmitter. But a stock from the factory CB radio designed for sideband will have a clarifier for receive only to tune. Coax. or coaxial cable. The wire transmitting the or carrying the transmission to the antenna. Delta tune. It's a similar form of the clarifier. Usually it's more switch selectable, one way or the other for a delta tune. Sometimes it's on an AM only rig, depending on how old the radio is. For those trying to tune in an off frequency signal. Dummy load. This is for transmitting into, for tuning a radio or testing the radio without interfering with everybody around you that might be on the airwaves. You transmit into a dummy load and the radiating pattern stays within that dummy load instead of being transmitted out to the world. Extension speaker, pretty much what it is, an extension speaker. Many CB radios, especially the mobile radios, will have a speaker on the bottom of the case, and if they're installed under the dashboard of a car or truck, the speaker is very low near the carpeted section of a car or truck, and the carpet absorbs a lot of that sound. And many times if there's too much noise in a car or truck, you need to hear the CB radio, where an extension speaker could be connected and the speaker could be somewhere closer or pointed towards you so that you can hear what's going on, who's talking on the radio. Frequency counter. It's a 5 or 6 digit numeric readout device that indicates specific frequency in megahertz. They sometimes will be put in the radio, or sometimes you'll see an external device where you will plug a coaxial jumper cable into it, or a short jumper, and then from there onto the antenna. And it will read, when you're transmitting, what the actual frequency of that transmission is. It's a frequency counter. Funny channels, this is kind of a slang term for CBers. It's any frequency other than the standard legal 40 channels. So funny channels can be considered anything above channel 40 or below channel 1. Okay, mic gain. And this is a variable on the radio to adjust the sound of your audio, hence talking through the microphone while transmitting. You can adjust for more sensitivity or decreased sensitivity. Mod meter or modulation meter. This sometimes will be built into the radio or an external device designed to show you a relative scale of how much modulation, how much audio is in that transmitted signal. Low pass filter. That's an inline coax accessory that lowers the amount of television interference when transmitting. This was more important back in the days in the United States when we were still receiving analog signals on television. Now that the United States has moved up to digital television, CB radio interference with televisions isn't quite as common now. So low pass filters probably aren't selling like hotcakes like they used to. LSB, that's lower sideband. That's a form of single sideband. It's a form of transmission. PA, public address, for a public address system. Many CB radios will have a PA switch, on a mobile radio especially, that you can switch over to PA and speak through a address system, a public address system, where a megaphone will be either attached under the hood of a car or truck or handheld, and you would speak into the microphone of the radio and speak your amplified audio out through the megaphone. Patch cord or jumper cable. Generally a 2 or 3 foot section of coax with PL259s on both ends of the cable. And it's used for external devices such as an SWR meter, a frequency counter, low pass filter, antenna tuner, so on and so forth. PL259, that's the name of the coax connector that attaches to the radio or other accessories. If you were to look at a standard CB radio coaxial end, it'll have a PL259 on the end of it. Such as RG8, RG58, RG8U, RG Mini 8. Power meter. Many CB radios will have a power meter. They're designed so that when transmitting you can see your amount of wattage output. There are external devices that can be plugged in line through the coax that can also read how much power that radio is transmitting. NB is a noise blanker, also another switchable device just like or similar to an ANL. Just another way of lowering the noise. Citizens band radios are very susceptible to a lot of car noise in a mobile situation, whether it's spark plugs, spark wires, bad grounding. Numerous things can produce noises in a CB radio, and hence the reason for noise blankers and automatic noise limiters. Receive preamp, that would be an external device that's hooked in line with the coax to amplify the received signal. Being that it's a receive preamp only and not a transmit amp, it is legal to use in the United States. RF just means radio frequency. RFI, that is radio frequency interference. Anything that interferes with the actual signal that's being received can be construed as interference, whether it's man-made or atmospheric. It's just interference. RF gain, that's another variable on the radio. If a signal is coming in too strong, the transmitter is too close to your radio, you can turn the RF gain down so that the signal incoming can be heard better. If the signal is too strong and too loud, it can overdrive the radio, hence making it difficult to understand. Reason for RF gain. Also, RF gain can be used just to turn down in case there's a lot of background noise and you don't want to have the squelch turned up. You can just back the RF gain down a little bit to lower the noise floor and still hear the signals being transmitted. RF output impedance, excuse me, that's the antenna's coaxial resistance value. It's 50 ohms. Roger beep, there are kits that can be installed into CB radios, and some CB radios nowadays, I do believe, have a Roger beep as part of the circuitry in the radio. These are just end of signal transmissions, end of signal beeps. Once you let go of the transmitter, let go of the microphone key, a beep will be transmitted. Some people don't like them. Some radio operators detest them. I could go either way on them. It's not a big deal. Skip. This is atmospheric conditions that carry radio signals over long distances. It's a CBer term. But you'll hear it a lot. Slider is also a CBer term. It's an illegal modification to the clarifier that slides the transmit and receive frequency from the stock specified frequency, or a tied clarifier. Tied, receive, and transmit together, tied. It's an illegal modification, but you see it a lot on sideband radios. Single sideband, SSB. That is just a general term for both upper and lower sideband. Sideband. Single sideband. Squelch. That is a tunable variable on your radio, tuned to just the right amount. Oh, excuse my dog, she's barking at something. Something that doesn't exist. Anyway, the squelch is a tunable so that you can cut out all static by moving the squelch up just to the point where you no longer hear any noise. And when a transmitted signal comes in, it breaks the squelch threshold and the signal is heard. Once the transmission is over, the receive goes back to the lower end of just the receive static, and the squelch pops back in again, eliminating the noise or hearing that bottom end low noise. Squelch is a very handy device on all CB radios. Stock mic. That is just basically the stock microphone that comes with the radio from the factory. It's not amplified. It is just a stock, either dynamic or electret microphone. SWR, we'll talk a lot about that later. That is standing wave ratio. And what standing wave ratio is the amount of transmitted radio signal being reflected back to your radio from your antenna. A standing wave ratio reading of 2 to 1 may cause serious damage to radios. What's happening here is if the standing wave is too high, there's too much reflected signal during transmit that's coming back to your antenna because the antenna is not matched to your radio. Hence why people use antenna tuners. But if it's just a CB and a CB antenna and you're not going anywhere but the stock 40 channels, you probably don't even need an antenna tuner. As long as the antenna is properly installed correctly and tuned prior to transmission for that radio, and you're good. Transceiver. That is a transmitter and receiver in one package. A CB radio is a transceiver. TVI, that's television interference. That's something that's, again, not quite as noticeable nowadays, that the United States has moved on to digital television. CB radios would have to have a tremendous amount of power to really do damage nowadays with digital receive on televisions. I'm sure it can still be done, and probably does, with illegal operators using high wattage amplifiers. More on that later. USB, upper sideband, another form of sideband. Voltage, such as the required voltage of a CB radio in an automobile or truck. It would be 12 volts DC, direct current. Or, that's just a term, 12 volts. 12 up to 13.8 volts DC. 13.8 is fine. Where are we at here? Wattage. Back to where we were talking about wattage. That's the output, the transmitting output of the radio itself. AM and FM is 4 watts. upper and lower sideband is 12 watts. And that's the legal limit, written in stone here in the United States by the FCC. Do people transmit beyond 4 and 12? I'm sure they do. SO239, that is the connector on the back of the radio that the PL259 plugs into. The antenna coax, the jumper cable, or the patch cord, or just the coax itself from the antenna in. And then 5-pin, 4-pin, those are just slang terms for the different types of microphone connectors that plug into the radio. At the end of the coiled cord, there'll be either a 5-pin or 4-pin, sometimes a 6-pin. It depends, and there's different types of 5-pins and different types of 4-pins, and they're all differently wired depending on the manufacturer and the year of the manufacturer. But they're just terms for the end of the microphone. Okay, let's move on. Okay, first off, I want to show you a couple of slides. First being the entire electromagnetic radio spectrum. And now I want to show you the slide for the CB band, which is 26.965 to 27.405. The entire electromagnetic spectrum, quite large, but within the one area, the HF band, on that chart you saw 3 to 30 megahertz, which was the HF band. Here's the HF shortwave band. 27 megahertz is just a tiny blip within that HF shortwave band. From 26.965 up to 27.405. It's just a tiny portion right in there. And they refer to that as the 11 meter band within that HF shortwave band. It can be referred to as an HF band or a shortwave band. I am just saying both for ease of learning. However, within that within that CB portion, Citizens Band radio portion, you'll notice that the channels step up in frequency, or in channels, in 10 kilohertz steps. And there are some areas where it jumps more than 10 kilohertz. In those in-between frequencies, where there should be a channel but there's not, CBers refer to them as the A channels, or A frequencies. And there's an extra portion between channel 3 and 4, between 7 and 8, between 11 and 12, between channels 15 and 16, and between channels 19 and 20. These are the A channels. What these were designed for initially was for radio control, such as toys, model airplanes, model cars, where they are controlled by radio frequency. Also, garage door openers, anything that's a low level transmitter, a low wattage output, very low. That's what these frequencies were designed for. There's still the in-betweens, the A channels. I don't know if they're getting a lot of use nowadays, though. Maybe still with model airplanes, hard to say. So let's go into operating conditions. Now, there are various rules and regulations put forth by the federal government with or without a license, doesn't matter. Once you purchase a CB radio, you should be receiving a small pamphlet with that radio, or at least they used to issue one. You may have to just go online now to look up the rules and regulations, where it used to be in a pamphlet. The rules and regulations show what you're supposed to and what not supposed to do when you're on the air, when you're transmitting. Most of it's pretty straightforward. However, it would be good if you decide to look more into CB radio to get yourself acquainted with those rules and regulations for the American CB frequencies. Also, on operating, it's fairly known that from channels 1 through to channel 30 are mainly used for AM and FM. It's supposed to be, however, this, it's not really a written rule. This here would be the by mouth said thing. From channels 30 on up, that would be for single sideband. Most single sideband operations on CB are lower sideband usage. However, you will see many AM operators use all 40 channels. Sometimes it happens. That's just how it goes. It's just the unwritten rule. Channel 9, of course, is the emergency channel. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Channel 9 doesn't get as much use as it used to. We'll talk more on Channel 9 in a moment here. Channel 17, Channel 19. Channel 17 is mainly used for truck drivers running north to south, or south to north. All freeways running north-south. Channel 19 is for truck drivers running east-west, or west-east. And that's how it is out here that I have noticed in the northwestern part of the United States. There's also another unsaid thing where you've got your channels 1 through 40, which are the legal frequencies, legal channels that you can use. There are illegal operators, illegal CB radio operators, that modify their radios so that they can go down below channel 1 or up above channel 40. And those operators that do operate their radio below channel 1 still will use AM. Those that transmit radios illegally above channel 40 are using sideband. However, some will use LSB, lower sideband, or upper sideband. We'll also talk a little bit more about pirate radio operating. Another frequency that's well known is the illegal calling frequency for pirate radio operators. That's 27.555 upper sideband. They use it as a calling frequency to see how far their signal can get out, make a contact with some other pirate operator halfway around the world. If they can make the contact, they go to another frequency and talk whatever they're going to talk. But you'll hear a lot of operators, when solar conditions are just right, on that frequency, which it is illegal in the United States to transmit there. Okay, as funny as these may be, these are the definitions that AM mode CB radio operators use. Also nowadays FM as well. Starting out with the term back out means the operator has quit talking. If you hear big strapper, that means a person that has a very large radio, big signal. It's also a cut down on somebody saying, oh, you're a big strapper, when they're really not. Bleed over, adjacent channel interference. Break or breaker, just meaning the operator wants to break into the conversation or wants to be allowed to transmit on that frequency, not knowing if there's a conversation going on at the time. So they say break or breaker, waiting for a reply. When they hear a reply saying go ahead, then they start calling for whoever they need to call for or whatever they need to do. Carrier, it's a radio's transmitted signal. Christmas Sea Beer. This is a radio operator that presents themselves on the air as a newcomer or one without radio operating knowledge. A Christmas Sea Beer. They just got their CB radio under the tree for Christmas. They just hooked it up. They're getting on it. Clear. Operators quit talking. Come back. Repeat message. Or in the 10 code, 10.9. Repeat message, please. Come back. Oh, I just said that one, didn't I? Control box. Device used indoors to control the direction of a directional beam, Yagi antenna. Copy means okay, understood. A dead carrier or dead key, it's a transmitted signal with no sound, no audio, just transmitting. A microphone keyed up, no audio. Flat side, the horizontal transmitting side of a beam or Yagi antenna. Many CB radio antennas back in the heyday, I don't know if they still do or not, have a horizontal and a vertical side. Horizontal for use on long distance communications or from Yagi to Yagi communications. Forward swing, the specific dead carrier meter reading with a modulation with the audio modulation added to the carrier, and the carrier gets stronger the higher the audio input. And there's my dog talking about it. That was forward swing. Where are we? Ground plane. Something that carries the transmitted signal. Don't know why that's on there. That's kind of a weird thing. Handle. Your AM radio operating name. You wouldn't use a handle if you were to be speaking on sideband. You most likely would have some sort of made-up call numbers, even though they aren't given to you by the FCC. For instance, rubber duck. That's a very well-known handle by many people. A rubber ducky, whatever. Handle, okay. Handheld. That is a term for a handheld walkie-talkie CB radio. Heterodyne. Squeals are high-pitched noises produced by more than one radio transmitting on the same frequency at the same time. Heterodyne, two signals at the same time, trying to converge, making squeals and noises. Every time I talk, the dog starts barking. Please excuse me and the dog. Okay, how am I hitting you? How do you read my signal? That's what that means. In the red or strawberry patch. You ask for a radio check. Somebody says your meter reading is in the red in the strawberry patch. That means that their analog meter is maxed all the way out, meaning you've got a full signal into their radio. Kicker, boot, or linear means an amplifier, an RF amplifier. They are illegal for CB use. Landline, that is a phone line. Lot lizard, that is a prostitute that hangs around truck yards. Okay, and Mayday, of course, is extreme emergency. I guess that would be a term for just about any radio, any frequency. Anyone hears Mayday, they know it's an extreme emergency. Okay, mod or modulation. It's the sound or voice that is carried through the transmitted signal. Mod limiter, referred to as the specific CB radio's component that limits the amount of modulation input to the final transmission stage. You'll hear people talk about a mod limiter and how it can be cut or taken out of line in the circuit of the radio to produce a louder audio during transmission. Mud duck, a radio operator that can barely be heard, a weak station, a mobile, just a weak station. Musical carrier, that is when someone takes a microphone, keys up the microphone, and plays music, puts it up next to a speaker of a radio, an AM or FM broadcast radio, and plays music over the CB radio. That's called a musical carrier. It's frowned upon. It still happens today, I'm sure. Negative. That's just no. On the side, that means stop talking and we'll listen in on the channel. Over mod means that the transmitted signal has too much audio in it, so much so that you cannot understand the person talking. It's garbled, it's way too loud, and it's hard to understand. Over mod. Pounds. That is the amount of signal received displayed on the radio's meter. And they refer to it in pounds. 1 pound, 2 pound, 3 pound, 4 pound, 5 pounds, 20 pounds, depending on what the number is on the meter. Key up or key down, that just basically means transmission of signal. You're grabbing the microphone, you're pushing the switch down. Keying up or keying down, same thing. Radio check. This is asked by radio operators to find out how well their radio is operating. They will want to know how well their signal is coming into your radio and what your approximate location is. React. That stands for Radio Emergency Associated Communications Teams. They used to monitor Channel 9 for emergencies. it used to be a widespread thing. I really don't think there are many at all left of any REACT units. An occasional Oregon State police officer might have a Channel 9 or a CB radio listening to Channel 9 in their vehicle. Of course, they also could be listening to Channel 17 or 19 as well. Reading the mail. This is an old CB term occasionally used. It means stand by and listening. Roger or Roger D, that just means affirmative, yes, I understand, correct. Rotor, it's the motorized device used to rotate a Yagi or a beam antenna. The rotor. Run, that just means use. What kind of radio do you run? What kind of radio do you use? Run. Sandbagger, one who listens in on other CB operators' conversations without acknowledging that they are there. Sandbagger. Scan the band or channel surf. Tuning around and listening. Scan the band, just tuning around, looking for people. Short keying. Unkeys the mic too quickly. When you're talking and you're new to talking on the radio, some people will release the microphone button too soon while they're still talking. Short keying. Standby. Listening to the channel, not transmitting. Just stand by. Listen to the channel. Don't transmit. S units. The same as pounds. Specific to the meter reading on your CB radio. And turn the house around. Rotate or change direction of your Yagi or beam antenna. Credit card radio, that is a very small, thin mobile radio. Very compact. Credit card radio. Off the key, that just means the operator has quit talking. Weaky squeaky, same as mud duck. A barely audible station, very hard to hear. What's your 20? That means what is your location? It's the same as 1020. 1020 is location in the 10 code. What's your 20? What's your location? 42, same as 10-4 from the 10 code. 42 just means understood, correct. I understand. 73s, have a good one, good numbers, see you later. Means goodbye. It's kind of a derivative, kind of an offshoot of ham radio, 73s. Only ham operators don't say 73s, they just say 73. CBers say 73s with the plural. And I'll throw in a slide of the 10 code, just for kicks. Okay, let's start talking about sideband operating definitions. You'll find that sideband operators are a whole different character on the radio, on CB radio. They more or less try to emulate ham radio operators. So you may find a more polite bunch of characters on sideband most of the time. On the sideband frequencies on CB radio. And when on sideband, they will use a lot of the same things that ham radio operators use, such as the phonetic radio alphabet. The phonetic radio alphabet is the same radio alphabet that not only the military uses, ham radio operators use, but so do the CB sidebanders. They also use the standard Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot, blah blah blah. The whole 9 yards here. Also, they use the same Q codes as ham radio operators. However, they don't use all of the Q codes that hams or amateur radio operators use. But here are some of the Q codes that they do use. We can get into that real quick. Starting off with QRG, when they're referring to frequency, as in, am I on frequency? What frequency are you on? I'm referring to frequency. QRM, this is interference on the radio. And this is man-made interference, such as a radio operator interfering with the conversation. Although they might be just a little bit higher in frequency or lower in frequency, but when they transmit, they interfere. So it's man-made interference, QRM. QRN is noise, it's radio noise. This would be also interference. Although it would be not man-made, it'd be just earth noise, basically. Okay, we don't need to put earth on there, but anyway, yeah, it's... Next is QRP. That would be low power. If an operator was to say, I am operating QRP, they're referring to their transmit is very low, such as possibly 10 watts or lower. The lower the better for QRPers. QRS means to send slower. QRT means to end their transmission. However, CBers, sideband CBers, would say that they are QRT, just meaning that they're ending for the night. QRU means no message. QRX means to stand by or standing by, waiting for a message, standing by. QRZ, this is a question. When you hear QRZ, they're asking who's calling. Who's calling for me? QRZ. QSB is transmission fading. You'll hear two people talk to each other, and one may have a hard time or a difficult time hearing the other station because the Earth's atmosphere is no longer helping that transmission so it can be heard. And the operator may say, QSB, your transmission is fading. QSL, this is written acknowledgement or acknowledged. QSO is a conversation. We're having a QSO on channel 38. QSY means to change frequency. such and such, please QSY to channel 39. There's too much QRM on this channel. That's what QSY. What do we got here? QTH, that means location. What is your QTH? What is your location? QSK is a question. Or, may I break into this conversation? CQ means calling. DX means distance. And of course, CQDX means calling for distant stations. Okay, let's move on. A little bit more here for sideband operating definitions. Call numbers. This would be your specific sideband number for personal identification. It's just something that you yourself would come up with. It's not something assigned by the federal government. You just don't want to pick some number that somebody else has locally so that you can get mixed up with the other operator. Comment. This is something you say over the air when you want to throw in a comment during a sideband conversation. Over. This is said at the end of every transmission to signal the other operator that is now their turn to speak. The word over is seldom used any longer, but on occasion during long distance sideband communications. Personal or first personal. This is asked when sideband operators first trying to get to know you. They want to know your first name. What is your personal? That means what's your first name? Portable. This term is defined as the sideband operator in a vehicle, a mobile. Why they call it a portable instead of a mobile? On AM, they call it a mobile. On sideband, they call it portable. A portable station, this is said when mobile, when wanting to break into a conversation or to be acknowledged on the channel. They would say portable station with their call numbers. QSL card, this is a written confirmation showing that you made contact with that person and it was sent via mail, postal mail, to your address. Station. This is said over the air when you're asking other operators for acknowledgement or to break into a conversation. Or when you're first getting on the air on a certain channel and you don't hear anybody, you would key up the microphone and say station to see if anybody is out there. Station on the side, this would be said over the air to tell people that you are monitoring that frequency. If somebody says you're Q5 over the air, that means that you are a full signal into their radio. When you're transmitting, they hear you complete 100%. Okay? You will notice that sideband operators refrain from using any AM CB lingo. Like I said, they try to emulate amateur radio operators. And they try to have decent radio etiquette while on the air. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Channel 9, which used to be considered the emergency channel. Nowadays in the United States, Nowadays in the United States, there really isn't an emergency channel anymore. It used to be that we had REACT units all over the United States. At the peak of CB in the 70s, REACT units, people would be standing by on Channel 9 waiting for people in need, people that were in accidents or saw an accident and was reporting it, or needed information on how to get somewhere. That's what Channel 9 was for, but now even most police don't even have CBs in their cars anymore, as of around the year 2000. I would imagine that there's still some state troopers that have CB radio in their vehicles. If they are a long distance driver, where they go into areas where there's no cell phone signal, where there's no cell phone signal, there's no cell phone signal for the people in the emergencies as well, so they cannot use their cell phone and might try to use a CB radio. But because Channel 9 really isn't any longer, in the event where you have a CB radio and that's the only thing you've got out somewhere in the boonies in your vehicle and you're stranded, best thing to do really is to find any channel on that radio where you hear somebody talking and to get their attention and let them know there's an emergency. And if it is an emergency where you see something bad happen, you need to tell them what the emergency is, where the emergency is, certain mile marker, certain area, closest town, closest gas station, whatever. Give descriptions of what is going on. If another car was involved, make sure to try to take down license plate, make and model of the car, color of the car, things of that nature, maybe even a time of when it happened. But that's about it. Channel 9 really isn't what it used to be. It's unfortunate because it did help out a lot of people. But now that we do have cell phones, that's pretty much taken over what Channel 9 did for us. So, there we go. On to the next one.